So, good afternoon, good morning. I'm not too sure. It's morning where you are, isn't it, Alan?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
And
just
I'm over in Thailand, so it's in the 6 o'clock. So, good evening, to Alan Chapman. It's lovely to have a chat with you, Alan. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on to Wise Women Weekdays. So I'm not quite with it today. Too much jet lag and traveling around and storms and weird things happening. But Alan, you've agreed to come on our little show to talk about plasma. And that really interests me because when I mention it to people, plasma, we automatically think about the blood. But there's
mm.
there's another angle to this, isn't there, which you're going to explain. So, but before you do, could I just ask you to introduce yourself and give us a background as to how you got to know about plasma and what you're all about, basically.
Okay. Well, I'm 66. I was born in 1957 in South London. I'm from what I call slum stock. My mum was genuinely raised in a South London slum, uh, and I've got mixed ancestral heritage, as we all have. And I know quite a lot more about my own than I think most people know about their own, but I can only really speak for myself here. So um, I've come to this through a lot of my own disintegration, which I think started really to happen in a big way in 2007 with the breakdown of my marriage. And then I was bereft without really understanding what was happening to me. And then I found, or I was found by, we found each other, a woman called Leanne, in 2010. We found each other singing in a choir, a scratch choir in Leicester in one of the festivals. Um, I didn't know that she was suicidal when I was with her. She'd lost her 11-year-old daughter to bone cancer. And she was what I call now being medicated for grief. So she was on antidepressants and sleeping tablets because of pressure from doctors and family and that sort of thing that happens. And then she took her own life, killed herself in 2015. And then I started to really learn about what she was teaching me, although I didn't understand what she was teaching me back then, but I do now with hindsight. So I then went deeper into disintegration because that's what often happens with suicide. And I just brought upon myself layer upon layer upon layer of trauma. And I went through what I've understood since then to be positive disintegration, which is something that I can refer you to, and then you can refer anyone who's interested to that. It's extraordinary, and that.
The word disintegration, and is this like a scientific term or a recognized term? Because normally when somebody says, "Oh, it's disintegrated," it's just
Yeah, well,
gone apart, fallen
that's what
apart.
yeah, it is. That I liken it to a disintegration of the soul or the self. And I'm paraphrasing um, the people who know a lot more about this than I do. Um, People can find it at positivedisintegration.com. And there are various long stories here that it would be easy to go off on diversions,
Yeah.
but since I'm really giving just a bit of background about myself, I'll not do that now. But that really enabled me to be reborn in many ways because that's what positive disintegration is about, and that's what it describes. It's not just the disintegration; it is the positive reformation or rebirth after after the
So is
disintegration.
it like somebody going through a breakdown?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
there's quite a lot. I mean, there. Okay, I'm 60 now, but in my growing up, I remember my parents would talk to people that might have gone through a breakdown, and I just remember there being a bit of stigma in those
Yeah.
days. You had a nervous breakdown, and oh gosh, you
Yeah.
know, be careful. I had to touch it with you know, gloves,
Yeah.
kid gloves and stuff like that. But I think I went through a breakdown a few years ago through something that happened in my life. And I knew that once I got through it, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I thought, I have to go through this process. I have to go
Yeah.
through this rebirth, or whatever you want to call it, to get to the other side, to see things in a different way. So is it similar to that?
Yes, that's a way of seeing it, and we can overcomplicate these things. It's much easier to understand it if you lived it, and by the sound of it, then you've lived
Yeah.
this. On the other hand, it makes it virtually inaccessible for somebody that hasn't lived it. You know, we can't really understand anything unless we've lived it. You know, we can't
Yeah.
go to university and study it and understand it unless
Yeah.
we've
Experience
lived
it.
it. So it is a rebirth of sorts after a breakdown. It is a way of seeing it without a doubt. And then I started to learn a lot more about suicide and about death. And to my mind, suicide is uh, a very, very helpful prism or lens by which to understand death. So I think that death, for me, death is the key to life, and suicide is the key to understanding death. And it's all related to fear and fearlessness and love, which is, in a way, fearlessness, because the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear, is another way to look at this. So I went through layers of trauma, and then eventually somewhere around 2021, 2022, I started to emerge from this thinking, oh my goodness me, this is powerful. This is really powerful. But when I explain that to people who are going, if they're in the middle of their own disintegration, as I was, and people had explained to me, oh, you'll get through it and there'll be this power that comes from it, I didn't believe them. So, because again, you haven't lived through it, so
Yeah.
you don't believe it. But when you do come through it, you think, my God, that's powerful.
That was a big
And,
lesson.
and
Can I just ask also, when you mentioned suicide, because I think some people might misconstrue this. Again, this is only my opinion, but suicide is, I mean, it's a very heavy word, and because of the connotations of suicide. So when you're saying, you mentioned it, and it was like an eye opener. How can I put this? I want to be really careful with my words. We're not giving permission to people to go and commit suicide, because is that like a
no,
sin as such?
no, that's right, and that's it. That's a very, very good point that you make there. So I don't wish trauma on anyone, but the point is, if it comes, then embrace it, because it's growth.
But it's going for the
So,
bystander, surely. The person that's committed the act of suicide, the pain that they've been in. I mean, what there's, and I don't want to, you know, digress too much here, but I just want to clarify this, because it's like, from what I believe how it has come across so far, somebody has committed suicide. It's like, oh, it's okay, don't worry, you know, you might come back again, or you might not. That's again another subject. We're not
yeah.
giving here to say, yes, if you want to kill yourself, it's good, because you're going to learn from that. Is it the bystanders? Is it the people that's left behind to witness that suicide? Are they the ones that learn? I mean, what about that person that has committed
Well,
suicide?
it depends. One of the aspects of positive disintegration, or there will be other ways of viewing this, but what often happens is that people go through a breakdown, and then they revert to um, who they were before. Whereas positive disintegration is that somebody goes through the pain and comes through the other side with a degree of fearlessness or maturity, where they've really grown through it and they've not reverted to how they were before the suicide. or before the mental breakdown. It doesn't have to be that someone has experienced suicide. It can be other things that cause people to have some kind. It might be homelessness, for instance. It might be something that has caused them to go so low that they've nearly died, and then, right, what happens after that? And so some people can, as I say, revert to who they were before, and then, you know, they don't actually grow. They have that experience, but they maybe lock it away somewhere and they don't visit it again. And they carry on pretty much how they were. But the positive disintegration model is a way of looking at what happens to people when they go through this transition, and they become, and we have to be careful with words here, and so I'll define them. According to positive disintegration, it is that people who go through this come out the other side and become more mature, or mature is a word that's used for that, as if when you've not been through this kind of growth, you're still immature or relatively immature. So that's positive disintegration terminology, but obviously that means different things. You know, if you use that in normal contexts and you talk about someone who's mature or immature, it would mean completely different things. But if someone's interested in looking at positive disintegration, then you will see that maturity and immaturity have different meanings within positive disintegration. So it's as if the slate has been wiped clean, and then you're reborn, and then you learn about life again, but you do it with an adult's brain rather than with a child's brain, or a baby's brain.
Yeah.
So getting back to how I understand these things, no, definitely I'm not advocating suicide. I would advocate, as I tend to, changing your diet and breathing and doing mindfulness and yoga and these kind of things, and walking every day, and these, you know, engaging with nature, and some relatively simple ways of changing how we feel and how our bodies are behaving.
Yeah.
And going back to Leanne, what I learned from her was, well, she wasn't able to do that, and because family and friends and most doctors have no idea about suicide, they're frightened. Going back to a point that you made, it's stigmatized. They're in denial. They don't believe anybody could ever do it that they love, that they know. It's a shock. You know, it's such a shock that someone could even, so you're in denial about whether it's even a possibility. You can't talk about it. You dare not ask a question because you're frightened that if you say to someone who you think could be, you know, wanting to harm themselves, if you can get to that point, you would not dare probably to ask, unless you've been taught about it and understood about suicide, you wouldn't dare to ask a question, are you thinking of hurting yourself?
No, we don't want to trigger anybody.
You'll think that it will trigger, and yet if someone is if they're genuinely wanting to kill themselves, they want to talk about it. So the fact that they can't unburden themselves, they can't talk about it, means that they continue to bottle it up. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a self-loathing that is so dangerous that they will attempt, or they'll start self-harming maybe, or they'll start self-harming. Doesn't have to be with obvious signs. It can be in other ways. It's a destruction that starts to happen in the mind. But for some people, it can be outward as well, and that's something else I could talk about, because there are some people that will kill someone else rather than killing themselves, and for some people it's combined. It's a homicide and a suicide, and I'm able to talk with personal experience from all of those angles because of what happened to me. And then I studied it more and more and more and more, and it just gives me these insights to myself and to other people and their fears and their denial and all kinds of stuff. Everybody's on their own path, as it were, learning and growing. And some people
Mhm.
get stuck forever and end up in the grip of big pharma, as I see it. Some people grow and grow and grow, and in the
Yeah.
end, some people will decide when they get to that stage of life, they decide they don't want to live anymore, and then it becomes a sort of voluntary euthanasia. And my dad was like that. My dad knew that he was diagnosed with dementia. He didn't want to talk about it, that he was going through this. And I had a discussion with him uh, very shortly after Leanne killed herself. So I was struggling with that grief. But that gave me the insight to talk to my dad about it. And my dad decided to stop eating and drinking
Mm.
because
Yeah.
he didn't want to go through
You didn't want to suffer. No.
and I said, Dad, if you don't start eating and drinking, you're going to kill yourself. And he said, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I let him do that.
Yeah.
He had an extraordinarily good death because he was not on any medication at
Yeah.
all. And so I've experienced quite a lot of this sort of deathly stuff, and it's rather beautiful, I think. But again, like Sue, I'm not glorifying death. I'm not glorifying suicide. I'm saying it's part of life.
Well, we're all
Death.
going to, there's two things, isn't there? They say that we can guarantee at the moment, it's taxes at the moment and death. And it is a perception, like anything in this world. It's your
Yeah.
perception of death. Is that the end? Your brown bread, you're dead, that's it. Or is it a transformation, an opportunity for a rebirth? Perhaps
Yeah.
we won't know until we have gone over that plateau.
Yeah.
But I think this is why you're here to talk about that and about plasma. So is this where plasma comes in?
Yes, it does. And that's a lovely
Okay.
segue. That's brilliantly done. So, what changed things for me hugely was when I discovered Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven.
Which
I
I
had
have here, yeah.
no, that's that book, yes.
Yeah.
And I had my own instincts about realities um, before I discovered or was introduced to the book by quite a deep friend who I know locally here, who's interested in these things because he's been through his own, uh, you know, I don't like words like journey because they're so cliched, but most people understand what I mean by that. So a while ago, I think about 2020, it was before I discovered the Temple book. I'd emailed Jim Peebles, who's a joint Nobel Prize winner for physics. And I'd emailed him because I'd seen his work or an article by him about the Big Bang. And he basically was saying that there was no such thing as the Big Bang, that there's no beginning and no end of time. And that to me has always made a lot of sense. I don't agree with numbers. I think a lot of numbers are nonsense. Again, we have to be careful with words and language, but to me, I I much prefer the idea of ancient or aboriginal wisdom and oneness, and that the past has gone, the future hasn't happened. There's only the moment, and so when I saw uh, Jim Peebles' work, I think it's Jim Peebles. I've written about it, and it's on alanchapman.com under the love on the love page. It's got the email correspondence there.
And I'll put it all in the description box anyway.
Yeah, for
Any
sure.
links, we can put those. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And thank you. And Jim was kind enough, I'm hoping I've got his name right now, but anyway, he was kind enough to reply to me. And I republished this email exchange on that web page that I put there. And then, so this at the time I called my theory of infinite universes, all inside our heads. So I think I was able to think about things this deeply because of what I'd been going through, because I was engaging so deeply with these existential questions. You know, what is it to be alive? What is it to be dead? And suicide opens that door to these considerations. And that I had done a lot of suicide reading. One of the other references I'll give you is a book called The Savage God by Alvarez. And I've read other work by Alvarez, and I came to Alvarez via an extraordinary story that I won't tell you now, but it's just part of this. Well, there's no such thing as a coincidence, and it's like an alignment of energies. How on earth did that happen? And then you realize I realized, well, I'm part, I can only speak for myself. I'm part of a much bigger system than what we're educated to believe about what life is. Robert Temple then, and then I first saw a video of his when he was interviewed, I think, by Heather Unsworth. And then I posted that onto the livewildlivefree.org website. I co-founded livewildlivefree.org with Maria Hennings Hunt. And this is another story of energies, because Maria and I were together as lovers when she was 17 and I was 19 going on 20. Way back, I fell in love with her in 1978, and it's another story. And for one reason or another, we went our separate ways, didn't know whether each other was alive or dead for 35 years. And then immediately after Leanne killed herself, I had to find Maria. I didn't know whether she was alive or dead. And then we kind of manifested each other, and maybe we did. And then we got back together again in 2015. I still work with Maria. I'm not going to go into any more detail about that because it's personal and it involves Maria, and she can talk for herself. And if anyone's interested in finding Maria, then you'll find her through livewildlivefree.org. Again, it's part of the energies. And where was I with this?
Right. Okay. Yeah, we want to get back to the plasma. What exactly is plasma? Let's go to the basics. What exactly is plasma?
Plasma means different things because we're looking at each other through a plasma screen now. When we use our smartphones, they are plasma screens. When we watch a flat screen TV, as they have been for a very long time, that's plasma. You mentioned blood plasma as well. So it has lots of different meanings. But in the Robert Temple sense, plasma is equivalent to the fourth state of matter. So we have solid, liquid, gas, and then plasma, which some people will understand as ether, E-T-H-E-R, or A-E-T-H-E-R, ether. So,
So what is the link between like suicide and death and plasma? Because that's how we start. We started with the plasma. We talked about trauma and death, and now I'm trying to bring it back into plasma so people know what we are talking about here.
All right. Well, plasma is pure energy. So Temple's hypothesis, or I would go further than that, say his evidence, because if you read the book, this is very clear evidence. And you have to read the book rather than watch the videos. If you read the book, you will see the evidence for the fact that, as Temple says, 99.9% of the universe is plasma, not atoms, or by extension, as I would say, subatomic particles. So because we're part of the universe, or universes, and I suppose one universe basically means the same as infinite universes. If the universe is 99.9% plasma, we are part of that. So this is pure energy. This is not atoms. It's something completely different, which is ether. So it would explain, let's bring it back to something that people can relate to much more readily, which would be something like Reiki as a healing. So there'd be some people that agree that this works, and some people think that it's mumbo jumbo, and that it doesn't work. But enough people know that for them, Reiki does heal them, help their health. Now, how can this be? How can a healing, which is an energy healing, where the Reiki practitioner is able to channel healing energies, how can that work? And I'll give you another example that people might be able to relate to. Many people would be able to relate to this, is the term zeitgeist. So this is a German word, and it's Zeit, which I can't remember exactly what that is, but Geist is ghost. So this is the energy or the feeling in a group of people who perhaps potentially around the world who are feeling the same thing. Now, how can that happen? How can that happen using normal ways of imagining a physical universe which is based on atoms, or what we think to be particles and subatomic particles? And to me, this sort of thing, and I'll give you another example. When dogs know that their owner is driving home and approaching home, many dog owners will say that the dog knows that the dog owner is a mile away or half a mile away. Now, it's too far away for the dog to be able to hear this in the car engine. There's something else. And if you talk to dog owners, then not just dog owners, I mean, it's cats as well, they understand human feelings. Now, how can this be explained through Einsteinian or Newtonian notions of a physical universe?
There's the 100 monkey effect. It's called the 100 monkey effect as well. Are you familiar with that one?
Is that the one if you sit them down to type Shakespeare?
No, I think it's one.
Tell me.
It's where a bunch of monkeys, I think, were cleaning an apple. I think they started to clean an apple themselves before they ate it. I could be wrong, but I think this is it. And then monkeys in another country started to do the same.
Wow. Okay, I love it.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. But it's called I think it's called the 100 monkeys effect, something like that. So yeah, you think, how come they haven't seen it on TV? They've not picked up the phone. It's just
I didn't know about
they picked it up somewhere in the ether, telepathically. So I guess it's the same sort of thing that we're talking about. And now you're saying that's linked through the plasma, is it, where we're all connected?
Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven, is remarkably a way of explaining this using words and language and other evidence that, to me, makes sense. It certainly makes a lot more sense than the Big Bang theory and lots of stuff about numbers that, to me, just don't make sense. I mean, the infinity symbol just doesn't really make sense to me. It's an attempt to explain the inexplicable, rather like we use words and language to try to explain death or heaven or any of these existential concepts, or perhaps anything at all. We use words and language, and these are human constructs, and we're using them to try and explain the inexplicable about what is life. Don't even need to go into death. We can say, well, what is life? What is it to be alive? What is consciousness? What is it when we dream? Where do we go to when we dream? Because when we're dreaming, that is very, very real. It's real enough to wake us and put us into a real panic because we thought we'd fallen off a building, or we thought that we were being chased and we were going to be killed, and we wake up. It's real. It's a reality that we've made in our head. And so, the difference between the conscious and the subconscious, and I've had very real experiences of manifesting where I've thought about something or somebody, and there it is, or there that person is. And I talk to other people about these things. And we've been conditioned to believe that these things are coincidence, but they're not. Sure, there are loads of coincidences. They're happening all the time. And one of the big theories is, well, there are so many billions and billions of chances of coincidences happening that sooner or later something's going to happen that's so extraordinary that you think, wow, that's got to be more than a coincidence. But I don't buy that. To me, there are no such things as coincidences. I think that energies and plasma, going back to answer one of the questions that you raised or alluded to about, what has plasma to do with suicide and death? It is that, in my view, we're all alive and dead at the same time, which is a preposterous thing to say, but it's actually true, I believe. And so this, when you engage very, very deeply with anything, you realize there's lots to be optimistic about. But as Robert Temple says in one of his videos, the good news is we live forever, but the bad news is we live forever. Now, I don't know to what extent that is true, that we keep coming round again, or we keep experiencing a life. And I don't know whether reincarnation is true or not. But one thing's for sure is I don't go to bed at night worrying whether I'm going to wake up in the morning, and plenty of people do. And I'm still extraordinarily fit and healthy, young, in many ways, getting younger and stronger. For my age, I have no wish to leave this human alive world yet. I think my best work is ahead of me. I'm an optimist, but I do think that there are another series of universes that exist, and we are all facets of one illusory world that we make for ourselves to try to make sense of whatever is going on. Temple can explain it a lot better. The book, as you've seen, and I'll hold up my copy with loads and loads of notes in it. See all those folded pages? That's where I've made notes in this book, because it's like, oh my goodness me. So the book explains it much better than I can, because it takes several hours to read the book. the videos that you see of Robert Temple explaining it are only an hour or a couple of hours long.
So are you saying, I mean, I've just bought it because I've come away. I'm traveling at the moment, and I just managed to get it. Thank you, Amazon. A day before I left, and I hadn't planning to read it. And it seems quite an easy read.
Yeah,
But just for those people that might be watching this video, you know, talking about the plasma and trauma and death, uh, how is it all linked? How can, by reading this book, how can this help somebody? Is it like a bit of a wake-up call to the reality of the world in which we live? I mean, because you also talked about coincidences or synchronicities, which and I just wanted to mention, as you were talking about that, the word synchronicity came
yeah,
from Carl Jung, who was a student of Freud, and he coined the word synchronicity, saying, you know, there is no such thing as a coincidence, and he was trying to prove that point with one of his patients or clients. She was having issues over the years, and he was her doctor, and she would not believe that you know there was a thing called synchronicity. And then lo and behold, as he was giving up, he said, because I've studied Carl Jung a little bit in my past, and it
yeah.
was actually giving up the process of trying to get this message across to her. And he was talking about, I can't remember the name of those Egyptians beetles. Oh,
Scarabs.
thank you, scarab. He was talking about a scarab beetle. I don't know why. I can't remember what the conversation was because this is me just thinking it as you're talking. And then as he's discussing the scarab with her, his client, something bashes on the window and it's a scarab beetle. And obviously she thought, oh, duh, I get it now. So we have
Yeah,
to go through an experience to realize how it, you know, and until you go through that experience, you don't have to believe it. But something, it's like a slap in the face, isn't it? Sometimes you think,
yeah,
oh, hey, I
yeah,
get it. And I think
yeah,
that's happening a lot with so many things that we've been going through at the moment in the last few years with this, I don't know, the world has been turned upside down and we're all running around like headless chickens, you know, people saying this and that and whatever. And a lot of us don't kind of get it until we go through a certain situation, a
yes,
coincidence, synchronicity, which is a bit of a look, this is a wake-up call, but that
yeah,
experience takes you through a new dimension of understanding. And I think that's what you're saying about with this book with the ether or the plasma. We're all linked,
yes,
we're all connected. Everything is connected. I mean, when
yes,
you, I don't know, you might have an achy head or something that could be linked to your shoulder, your big toe, because the whole body is connected and the body is connected to other bodies. We are all one,
yeah,
but you can say
yeah.
that we're all one and then you go off and have your dinner and you think nothing more of it. But by reading this book, it illustrates how we are all connected. Is that, I think, what you're saying? Through the ether.
Yes, and I would say there's something for everybody in the book. In the
Mm.
same way that we can read a book when we're 20 and then read the same book when we're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. I haven't got to 70 yet, so I don't know what it's
Mhm.
like. But it's as if we're reading a different book because we see the world, and this isn't my maxim, lots of other people use this. We see the world or we sense the world how we sense or see ourselves, not how the world or our external environment is.
Mm.
So, as we grow ourselves, as we learn more about ourselves, then we learn more about everything else. And in many ways, we learn that we pretty much know nothing.
Yeah.
We can't rely on anything. We can't even rely on, what we can see or touch, especially when you go really deep with plasma. Well, you don't even have to go deep with plasma if you just understand basically what atoms are, which they're mostly nothing. It's mostly nothing.
Yeah. That
It's
blew my
mostly,
mind.
it's
But
mostly
what?
nothing.
Yeah.
But what plasma does is explains, well, the nothing actually is plasma.
Yeah. Because
And
when
this,
I think when I did a course on anatomy and physiology, I've done several, but I can't retain the information. My brain doesn't retain names and numbers and things like that. It goes in my body somewhere, but I can never, like I just couldn't remember the name of a scarab beetle. But when I did one course and we learned about atoms and subatomic, you know, like the electrons and the neutrons, and I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away, because it means we are nothing, and from nothing matter is created. So this is why I'm very excited to read it, because that takes it to the next level, doesn't it? To the next level.
It will explain to you whatever you want explained. And he doesn't just talk about the Kordylewski clouds, the plasma clouds that are geometrically positioned. The book starts with that. I'll show you a diagram.
The moon and the sun. I mean, so the moon and the earth.
Yeah, the moon and the earth and the Kordylewski clouds. And there. So it has this diagram. That's at the very beginning of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
And so it starts with that, but then it goes back to what a lot of people would call conspiracy theories about, you know, military intelligence and what has happened with that. And it touches on, well, it does more than touch on, but it talks about things like information theory, which Jacques Vallée referred to, and the French character that Francois Truffaut plays in Close Encounters of the Third Kind was based on Frank Vallée. And Frank Vallée talks about information theory. Robert Temple talks about information theory, which is different to scientific theory. That's another thing. I mean, there's almost a book in every couple of pages with.
They take you off somewhere else.
There could be another book written about it. But so there's something for everybody in it, and whatever way you want to engage with life or yourself, there'll be a level in this book and information that you think, oh, wow, that's really, really interesting. And then it will naturally take you to the next level. And then you go to the next level, then the next level, and next level. And it's so beautiful. It's terrifically optimistic, though, because the book is written with great beauty and delight. It's terrifically entertaining.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take itself too seriously. And I love that as well, because laughter is a great healing energy, and a lot of people don't realize that. So that's another way of looking at it. How come that laughter makes people better?
Yeah, it heals you. Totally. It's the hormones, isn't it? It's happy hormones rather than the cortisol or the adrenaline. It just changes your whole body, and we are full of hormones, and we need to be happy and healthy and not live in fear. Or, you know, we like, that's why yoga meditation is so good, because it takes you to the parasympathetic nervous system, where you're not stressed, you're not in the sympathetic, where you're fight or flight all the time. Our body's not geared up for that. So we want positive news. So this can be life-changing for people if they choose to read it.
I'd go so far as to say that anyone who reads that book they might not feel it straight away.
Yeah.
But I reckon anyone who reads that book, their life will be changed by reading it.
Excellent.
It might take overnight, because the brain works on things, as we know, while we're asleep.
Yeah.
The subconscious is extraordinarily powerful, in many ways, much, much more powerful than the conscious, because the conscious is just this collection of brainwashings that we've had. It's a starter motor that then gets the subconscious or unconscious to start working. That's what really shifts things, is about neuroplasticity. So we know from the work of people like Joe Dispenza that the mind can heal the body. We know that it does seem that there's very clear evidence that when people go out on a walk and they do a meditation in and around a community, that the crime rate drops.
Yes.
How does that happen? You know, this is fairly recent.
We're all connected. Yeah, Why do you think, though, Alan, that we're not taught this at school or college or university? Why is this not introduced into our curriculum for learning?
But my personal view about this is that for at least 120, 130 years, and more likely hundreds of years, some malevolent, deranged forces, people, elites who control empires, have controlled the education system. So we see this happening generation to generation to generation. So my three children, when they went to school, they couldn't engage with it at all. It just didn't move them. They were, all of them, naughty in their own ways. They couldn't wait to get out of school. This was in the days where you could actually get a sort of release, vocational release at the age of 14. All my three kids flew when they left school because the education system, even back then, and this is when my oldest is nearly 40. My kids were born in 87, 88 and 84. So it gives you an idea of when they were at school. But the education system was corrupt and ridiculous back then, and was then a feeding, a kind of sausage machine to persuade people to go to university and then come out with loads and loads of debt and to get educated academically to do what? And so my view is that the education system has been part of a systemic and at the very top, a willful, knowing genocide, rolling empire to empire, but actually really, really more seriously ratcheted when the computer age started, because that enabled all of this to be seriously ratcheted. And the World Wide Web, which was invented for good, like lots of things, became harnessed by malevolent forces. And now we find that, I think, as I understand it, in the UK, schools are prohibiting the use of smartphones in school, which is a very, very good thing, because that's wrong use of plasma. It's, you know, these devices are addictive, and it's like fire. You know, fire can be used to make us warm or cook our food, or it'll burn us, or we can use it to burn other people.
The user isn't behind anything. The last, I think we're going to close in a moment because we've been off for nearly an hour, because I think you and I could talk for a long, long time, and I know you've got so much more to say. But I think about other subjects as well as the plasma. But I think just talking about the schools, I just did a chat with a friend of mine, Sarah, and she's a psychotherapist, and she works with the children, talking about the schools now. I mean, thankfully, I've got three kids and they finished school, but what's going on at the schools is quite worrying, actually. And I didn't know, because I'm not linked to the school system anymore, but where children are being isolated, you know, if they've turned up late because they've missed the bus, or the parents didn't get them to school on time. There's things going on at school which isn't really healthy for that individual. And I do agree with you. I think it's a form of indoctrination, but we've trusted our children. We pass them on to the head teacher because they wear a suit, or the teacher because they've got a label saying, you know, my name is Mrs. Smith. And we just think, here's my child, you know, you have them for the day and teach them good things, but we don't really always know what's going on. And and so I think what you're saying is they don't really want us to know about this sort of information. It's being kept from us.
And also
the light, Alan.
Interestingly, the retired editor of A New Science of Heaven and of Graham Hancock's work, and this is Hancock's latest book, Graham Hancock, without a D, grahamhancock.com, has a video of his presentation summary of this book at Bath, I think it was. That's extraordinary. So Mark Booth, whose pen name Jonathan Black, and I have emailed with him about. I had a couple of queries about this this book.
Mm.
And Hancock aligns with a lot of what Temple says about the pyramids are not 5,000 years old. They're at least 12,800 years old. And they were built with a technology that we don't have now.
Mm.
So there's a lot that's been kept secret from us. Modern schools don't understand this kind of stuff. The teachers are doing the best. This is the point. Everybody's doing their best in the way that they see themselves and in the way that they see the world. But I agree with you about schools. Parents are far too respectful of authority. They don't, if you put on a high-vis jacket or you've got a lanyard, you can basically control the street. Nobody will ask to check your credentials because people have been brainwashed to be so subservient, and so it is with teachers. And yet, I mean, you look at the gender dysphoria stuff happening and the way that schools are now being brought into line to say, well, no, actually, you cannot, as a default, affirm a very small child who wants to identify with a different gender and all this kind of stuff. So it's systemic, like all genocides, like all holocausts. It's systemic, but at the very top, there is a derangement, I think. I don't know what the purpose of it is. If there is a purpose, perhaps it is to teach us to be careful and respectful, and it's to allow humanity and grow and learn. But I want to end on a positive note. That is, read the book and educate yourself about everything that you've been told, about everything that you've been taught, and question everything. Question everything around you. Question everything that I'm saying. Question everything that's in these books. Definitely question governments. Definitely question big pharmaceutical companies. Definitely question multi-millionaires and multi-billionaires and the people who control all of these technologies and big media and all that kind of stuff. Follow the money and realize that health is much more important than money. There are an awful lot of people with millions and millions and millions, billions, in fact, and they're terrifically unwell. And in some ways, that's how they got the money, because they're unwell. Do you know what I mean? So just smile and enjoy every beautiful moment. And thanks ever so much for having me on this wonderful podcast discussion and sharing.
Very welcome. It's lovely. First time we've met. It's a very interesting conversation, and we'll talk again about other subjects. And thank you so much for your time. And those that are watching this, so again, Karen from Wise Women Weekdays. If you like what we've been talking about, give us a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the channel. And any comments, if you have any questions for Alan, just put it in the comments, and we will get back to you. Okay, and so I should also say Happy New Year to everybody, because I think that's looming, isn't it? So Happy New Year to you, Alan, and to everybody else.
It is for many, many people all around the world, and namaste and all the good things for everybody. Thank you.